Hi, and welcome back to Rick's Room. Now, this is the show where we simulate that time at the end of a busy conference. You've been working all day, your feet are killing you. You finally get a chance to sit down in a comfortable seat, probably in a lobby or a hotel bar, and you see someone coming across the room that you've been wanting to talk to all day. Well, my guest today is someone I've been wanting to talk to for months, years, because it's been that long since we've been able to catch up. And you're going to find out why as he starts to tell this story, because he's been extraordinarily busy in our industry. His name is Mitch Cohen, and he currently owns ClearLine. Tell me the name. Tell me a name.
ClearLine Crisis, Rick.
ClearLine Crisis. And see, I can't even say crisis because in my PR business, I don't even play over there, Mitch, because it's such a complex part of the business. I want to talk about that in a minute. But first, I want to just catch up a little bit because we met, 25 years ago, maybe?
I think it's been at least that long. It was back when I was with FNC, which has since been long absorbed into CoreLogic knee or Cotality knee CoreLogic.
Yeah, it's changed its clothes many times over the year, but you were there in the beginning when it was really, really doing some innovative things, and you were the communications arm for all of that, right?
Yes, we built an entire communications platform from scratch out of a converted old folks home in a small town in Mississippi. It was those were some days. Those are really fun startup days that I kind of miss.
Yeah,
although I have been revisiting them lately.
You're kind of in the full circle story. We're going to get to that. Then you went into PR. You did public relations for the industry for many years, right? And then you went to work at the big companies, and we'll talk about that. And now you're back running your own shop, getting this started. So, Mitch, you are one of my favorite writers, creative writers. You're very artistic, and we can talk about that in a minute. You could have done anything in the communication spectrum, and yet you chose crisis communications, probably the scariest part of the whole business. Why?
Well, Rick, you're right. It is the scariest part of the business, and I had the fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it, benefit of learning my crisis chops during the great financial crisis when the mortgage industry was at the center of a global financial meltdown, and my clients at the time were implicated in some of the more well-publicized aspects of the crisis, let's say. I learned early on that preparation is key to how you manage that crisis, and it becomes even more key to whether you survive that crisis. Unfortunately, what I also realized was that no one has done that preparation. No one has done that preparation work. And Rick, you gave a good roundup of my career. I've been on the agency side. I've been inside. I've been at startups. I've been at mid-sized organizations. I've been at corporate giants. And across the board, every single one of them, that preparation layer, it's not really there. I mean, if there is a crisis communications plan, it's on a shared drive somewhere where perhaps it's been looked at in the last year, and maybe the spokesperson still works at the company, and the regulatory posture probably has changed because the regulatory environment has changed, and so the plan becomes less of a plan and more of a document. And what I realized was that that preparation layer becomes the focus for a response layer, and that response layer is missing everywhere except at the very, very, very talented and very highly compensated crisis communications firms that one can engage at the moment of crisis. The preparation work isn't there, but the response piece is. It's just reactive and very expensive. So when you ask me why I turned to crisis, it was because after I left corporate world and went back to consulting and saw that still the same situation was repeating itself over and over again, I had been working in corporate. I went from agency. I was recruited from the agency I was working at into Black Knight. Black Knight had been a client of ours prior at when they were LPS, and I came in and established an in-house public relations function for Black Knight. Now, that wasn't purely crisis. That was building the narrative for the entire company. There was a modernization uh, push that we were going through, and the company was very aggressive with acquisitions, did 7 acquisitions in 2.5 years to build an
Oh,
end-to-end mortgage technology ecosystem. And that was that was a large part of what I did in terms of narrative development. But there were the crises that would come. Black Knight was a target of litigation on multiple occasions, and each one of those represents its own crisis. But you know that in this industry, even a servicing transfer done wrong, right, is a
sure.
crisis in and of itself, and then how that's handled will determine, things like retention or regulatory attention. um,
Sure.
and so when you ask me why I turned to crisis, it's because there's an entire swath of American business that is not prepared for crises if and when they come. And I thought, well, someone needs to serve them. This coincides with incredible advances in technology, LLMs, right? With the proper guardrails and constraints, LLMs have now matured to the point with, and I'm talking proper guardrails and constraints, a very robust crisis communications doctrine,
Mhm.
language rules. I'm a writer and I take language exceedingly seriously.
Oh, yeah.
Language rules so that it doesn't sound like an AI. But it became now possible with the right guardrails and constraints and rules to provide practitioner judgment, but at scale. And that has never been possible. You always,
Yeah.
it always came down to you had to have a crisis communications pro in the room.
Yeah.
What I've tried to build with ClearLine and what I have is the infrastructure for that reputation layer that brings that crisis communications advisor into the room and helps companies get to that state of preparedness.
Oh, Mitch, that's brilliant. I've always thought that the time to bring in crisis communications folks is when you are certain there's a crisis happening. But the way you're talking about it, companies, all kinds of companies should be talking to you well ahead of that. Or am I hearing you wrong?
No, you're hearing me exactly right. And the preparedness part of crisis communications is overlooked, and that's what led me to build ClearLine in the first place. Okay, let
Make
me
it
give
easy.
you an example. In ClearLine, right, we have 137 right now, 137 distinct scenarios. They run the gamut from, like I mentioned, a servicing transfer gone wrong. That's one. But also a breach, a cyber breach, or a breach at a vendor, a third party breach, or executive misconduct, or let me think, natural disaster, you know, interruption of service. Think of a crisis, and it's probably mapped to in the library. What we do, what ClearLine does, and ClearLine is a platform. I should be clear about that. Uh, ClearLine is a platform, and it allows for companies to work through each of these scenarios yeah, that apply to them and within their industry. And it's the wonderful thing about it is that it extends across industry verticals. But you walk through generating playbooks through a general interview format. It asks questions about the company, about what your vendor exposure looks like, who your decision makers are, and they're all tied to the individual scenarios. And it runs through these, and then will produce a board ready playbook tied to that generic scenario.
What is the most important thing companies need to be thinking about in terms of crisis communication?
I would say identifying the scenarios that are of the most likely occurrence and to your given situation, your given company, your industry vertical, your particular situations, and map those out and map them out with a full and honest understanding of how you would respond, uh, and be brutally honest with yourself. But you go through the different scenarios and practice those and build your playbooks. You then need to practice those, right? You need to have a spokesperson that can speak, if and when that breach comes, that spokesperson's going to get a call. It's going to be 11:30 on a Sunday night, and they need to be available, and they need to know what they're going to talk about, how they're going to speak to it. What ClearLine does is it produces that playbook, but then it also allows for the practicing. There's a built-in spokesperson training loop where you are asked increasingly aggressive questions by a reporter, a bit on any subject, right? So it can be one of the various scenarios that you're in, but it can also be tooled to, you're training for a regular media interview, or a board briefing, or whatever it may be. But it asks questions and then grades your responses based on how well you convey your key messages, how how tightly wrapped your answers were, whether there are any holes that could be exploited by the interviewer. And it's something that can be done on a repeatable basis. And by doing that, the spokesperson becomes ever more ready. If and when a crisis does occur, in ClearLine, you shift immediately into response mode, and those playbooks that had been part of the prep work and become the foundation for the actual crisis playbook. And it incorporates the facts on the ground, updates the playbook with the immediate guidance, steps that should be taken in the first hours, in the first days. It maps out the stakeholder sequencing. There's a rules engine built in, Rick, that I'm very proud of, because I don't know if you know this, but if there's a breach, and this is across all industries, if there's a breach, you have 54 different jurisdictional reporting requirements, right?
Oh,
And you need to, and they all have deadlines, right? And the clock starts ticking on each of them. And a breach is a reportable event, so you have to report, and then you have to, submit these obligations. Well, I built the rules engine in there so that new content, first of all, is plugged in as content. No, I mean, new rules are plugged in as content, not engineering. You don't have to rebuild the system. You just plug in all regs, or you plug in a law library, or you plug in SEC regulations, what have you. Whatever the rule source is can be accepted in. And then the rules engine brings that regulatory piece in. So the crisis communications is, yes, there's the PR component, there's what you say to the public, there's the holding statement, there's all of that, how you handle the media, how you handle your employees, how you handle all the stakeholders. But then there's that regulatory piece as well. And so ClearLine addresses that, and it floats up these regulatory requirements and tracks them. And then it becomes the system of record for the entire communications piece. And anyone who's listening to this, who's ever been in a regulatory investigation, knows how hard it is to pull together everything that they're asking for. And if the communications layer, you're trying to think of, well, okay, where is that document? How many versions were there? Who approved it? What was that approval chain? Do we have, any sort of record of it? Where's draft 3? Because between draft 3 and draft 4, there was a significant change, And what ClearLine does is it captures all of those and time and date stamps them. Any edits have to be justified, and then they are captured. And any changes to an approved upon plan need to be justified and are then tracked, and with the actor and the reasoning behind it. It becomes an entire system of record, an infrastructure layer for that reputation piece.
Mitch, I can't think of a better person to build this kind of thing than you. You've lived through it for the last 20 years. Our viewers are going to want to know more, so I'm going to ask you in a minute for how they can get in touch with you. But first, I want to go back to when we forged our friendship. At that time, I was a young writer. You were a young writer. You
I
had
had hair
learned
down
of,
here, I
yeah,
think.
you did, you did. And you were doing creative writing that just knocked my socks off. It was amazing.
Thank you, sir.
Is that still part of your life? Is it in there? Where does that creative side of Mitch Cohen exist in the world that you're living in today?
Um, well, once a writer, always a writer. So there is uh, a certain writerly element to my days. My creative focus for the last 18 months or so has justifiably been this thing that I've been building.
Mhm.
And it's been a new type of creativity, but one that I've enjoyed to no end. Um, you ask though, that Mitch, the one that wrote the short stories, he's still around. He's learning to play guitar,
Ah, good,
and
good.
he draws and paints, and he is still as tied to music as he is to oxygen. But he's not writing short stories anymore. I unfortunately, and now that we've had this conversation, I'm thinking, well, maybe
Maybe that then
there's
it was
something that needs to be done.
the value is right there, man. If that's all we accomplish in this, it's worth it. All right,
Oh,
now
thank you.
people are going to want to know more about ClearLine. Where do they go? How do they find out?
Oh, the website is clearlinecrisis.com, and there is a lot of information. There's the great thing about Clearline is that it was originally built for the mid-market, for the 150,000, 60,000 organizations out there that are big enough to have the reputation risk exposure if something goes wrong, but not big enough to afford those retainers. So there on the website there, you'll see uh, there's a single organization model, a multi-organizational model, an enterprise model, and it drills down deep into the mortgage industry, insurance vertical, where we've had a lot of positive traction, private equity as well. One of the great things about ClearLine is its multi-org functionality, and it has a parent-child structure. So one organization, say a mortgage holding company, and then their origination arm and their servicing arm and their warehouse arm. Uh, each of those has their own crisis communication stance, their own preparedness level, their own playbooks, their own uh, spokesperson training. But the parent has visibility into all, and then has also the ability to push down templates and structured pieces of the playbook that must adhere to certain guidelines, red lines that can't be crossed, and so on. It allows the parent to have planning control as well as visibility into the crisis preparedness and response of their children
That's fantastic,
organizations.
man. Well, that's experience from working with both big companies and small companies, which you have done. What about an email? Can we give them your email if they want to?
Absolutely. I'm Mitch at clearlinecrisis.com, and I'd love to hear from anybody that's listening to your show, Rick.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right. We've been visiting with Mitch Cohen. He's been everywhere in our industry. And most recently, he started his own firm that's got some very interesting technology you need to learn more about. Mitch, let's not wait so long to catch up again.
Absolutely,
That
Rick.
was
It's
painful.
been too long.
And send me that first short story you write, and then we'll have you on the show again.
All right, I'll come back on as an artist.
Thanks for being here, and thank you all for watching.
Thanks for having me, Rick.